last true S4. Welcome back. So I figured we should formally introduce this car. We had one video about some maintenance and a couple things we did to get this thing running. But today we're gonna kind of tell the story of how I got this car, the things that we've got done to it, maintenance, mod, and stuff like that. First and foremost, let's talk about how I got this car. So this is a 2000 Audi B5 S4 finished in Nogaro blue with Nogaro interior. And I ended up picking this thing up last summer. It was literally a barn find sitting in a barn covered in dust. So with this car, the interesting thing is this car has been around Omaha for many years. And I first saw this thing when I was like 16 years old. First learned what a B5 S4 was, 6-speed manual, twin turbo. Like, of course I wanted one. And I remember seeing this thing roll through a parking lot a few years ago, and I'm like, holy crap, that's literally my dream car, dream spec, dream color in my city. Like, I was freaking out. Talked to the guy a little bit, got some information about what's done to it, its mileage, stuff like that. And after that, the car disappeared for a while. It resurfaced in like 2020. I ended up becoming good friends with a guy who was kind of like upkeeping this car. His name is Nick. And he needed some help with some maintenance. The drive shaft was going out, the alternator was failing. So I had an old S4, it was a piece of garbage. It wasn't really the color I liked. It was in terrible shape. I was young, I had no money. I beat the literal crap out of it and didn't do any maintenance. So that car died. With that said, I stole the alternator off of that. I came over, I helped him replace that. I did the drive shaft, a couple other things, and we got the car started. And unfortunately, very shortly after that, this car sold and disappeared for probably 2-3 years before I ever saw it again. They see me rolling, they hating, I'm fat and nerdy. Like I said, I picked this thing up about a year ago, and it was literally in a barn. Like, that's not an exaggeration calling this a barn find. When I picked it up, the interesting thing is the guy we sold this to literally put like 100, 200 miles, something like that. So it's sat pretty much the way I left it the last time I worked on it. So with that said, this car needed a lot. First things first, when we picked it up, valve covers were just puking oil and smoking all over the place. Brake pads were worse for wear. The drive shaft was kind of semi-repaired, but when me and Nick repaired the drive shaft, we didn't exactly use the best bearing, so it kind of fell apart very shortly after. The exhaust was cut off, AFR wasn't working. I could go on for hours about all the stuff this car needed. A couple of things I did to restore it is, first things first, redid the valve covers, put brand new valve covers that were freshly repainted and gaskets. Coil packs, 2.0 coil packs with adapter plates, injectors, spark plugs, brake booster check valves, Y pipe, spider hose, headlights, tail, all that garbage. First things first, when I got this car, the very best thing to do was clean it up because it was dusty as hell and just neglected. And then, of course, catch up on maintenance. So with that said, I probably dumped a few $1,000s in the first couple months of just owning this, trying to get it back to driving condition, and it still was pretty crappy. Next, we're going to talk about pros and cons of this car. So the 2.7T is a very love and hate relationship type of engine. It can be reliable, they can make a crap ton of power, but for somebody wanting to just first get into one of these cars, the B5 platform, specifically the S4, one of the things to notice is if you have the 2.7T, there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done before just throwing any power at it. With that said, a lot of people will buy these cars completely stock on the original Borg-Warner KO3 turbochargers, and they'll decide to put manual boost controllers because these cars have a ton of boost leaks, so they try to mask it with manual boost controllers, turn the boost up, put ethanol tunes, or just put stage 2+ tunes on these cars with stock turbos, stock spider hoses, leaking valve covers, leaking check valves, and just try to send it. And that'll last for a while. They can make a lot of power even on the stock engine and turbochargers, but it's kind of just playing a game of longevity because stock KO3s are only good for so much mileage, especially if you turn the PSI to anything past 15 pounds. If you're gonna wanna get into one of these, one of the first things I would do, even if you're not looking for more power, is to replace the turbos either with stock KO3s. Otherwise, the best option to do for these is to go with some Borg-Warner KO4s. And if you wanna go even crazier, you can do Franken Turbo F21s, which aren't necessarily the best turbochargers, which this car happens to have, unfortunately. Or you can step it up and do some billet RS6 turbos, or you can go single turbo. It's not just a power thing, adding turbos, because you're replacing a 150, 200,000 mile stock turbocharger with new components. So it's a good maintenance item to do. You replace your check valves because they tend to leak a lot. Do your injectors because the injector O-rings can leak and those don't last forever. Do your fuel pump if you want to do a high 93 tune or E85. Upgrading your fuel system will allow you to have a higher duty cycle, which just means your pump and your injectors aren't working so hard to keep up with the power you're putting out. Next would be, of course, taking care of leaks, your valve cover gasket, your oil pan gasket, oil pan sensor, your alternator, valve, intercooler. Side mounts are only good for so much power. They tend to heat soak after a few runs on any high output S4. My main point is maintenance is so key to putting power at these cars. Once you do maintenance, these 2.7Ts can actually be very stout motors. They sound great if you open up the exhaust, do cap and down pipes. They can sound really good. They can make a lot of power reliably if you buy one of these and you just replace literally everything you can see. A few pros that this car has going for it is, number one, it's a great looking chassis. It's been around for a long time, so there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of forums and a lot of information about how to do stuff on these cars. There are a lot of big guys in the Audi B5 scene that know a lot about these cars. You can find them on Audi Zine, on the Audi B5 S4 Facebook groups that can give you a ton of information. There's pretty much a DIY or a video on how to do anything on this car, which is great. Second pro this car has going for it is you can make a lot of power for not a lot of money, depending on the maintenance of your car, of course. And then a few cons I'd say is, of course, reliability, cost of ownership, cost of parts can be very expensive, of course. Like a front bumper, for example, if you break it, it's probably going to cost you anywhere from $8,000 to $2,000. Which could have cracks and missing paint and chipping and all that. Like, bumpers aren't cheap, so parts are definitely expensive. Another con I would say is these things aren't the best fuel consumption wise. Like, it's just an expensive car to like keep going. That's all I got. All right, I'm glad that we're up here now, because one of the first things I did when I got this car is I replaced the god-awful TSW wheels it had some very heavy cast, like 40-pound TSW wheels, and they were some of the worst designed wheels I've ever seen in my life. Straight out of the AutoZone category. With that said, now I've got some Neospeed RSE 14s wrapped in 235, 35, R19 tires with the Porsche brake kit in the back. All right, now we'll talk about what's done to the car. So this car's got a lot done to it, and I can't take credit for everything that's been done because this car was kind of already built when I bought it. And I guess I'll just say that I've redone a lot of the stuff that's been done, since a lot of it wasn't necessarily functioning properly. So starting with turbochargers, like I said, this car's got Franken Turbo F21s. F21s are kind of a hybrid between KO4s and, like, I'll say KO4s and RS6s because they're kind of like in the middle. The center housing rotating assembly of the F21 is a little bit larger than a KO4. With that said, you get a little bit more power, but you do get a little more lag on the low end. So it's kind of a middle of the road turbo option. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of them. I plan to replace them. The front brakes, I've got Porsche 993 calipers, 4-piston old Porsche brakes, also known as the StopTech ST40. Huge 325 millimeter drilled and slotted Porsche rotors up front as well. For the exhaust, we've got a vibrant muffler, catless downpipes. For suspension, it's got Vauxhall coilovers. They ride okay, they're not bad. They're stiff in a good way, the car's not too bouncy, and I can run pretty lowered, and it's pretty tight, so it doesn't really rub a lot, which is great. So I definitely say I'm a fan of the coilovers, especially over H&Rs. We've got a Walbro 525 fuel pump, which is also called the Hellcat fuel pump. Like I said, that will just help a lot with the duty cycle, especially since I run ethanol on this car, 100%. And then we've got 1000cc Bosch injectors running for fuel. Oh, and an RS4 clutch and pressure plate. So we just did a little bit of a drivability video for you, and if you guys couldn't tell, one of the biggest Achilles heels with the B5 S4 platform is definitely the handling. Reason B is the engine is super heavy. It's a cast iron block with heavy turbochargers and heavy components, and it sits way above the front axles. So this car understeers a lot, and the rear end like literally kicked out on me over there. Luckily, I'm pretty used to this car, so I was able to correct it pretty easy. But for somebody wanting to get into these cars, it's very deceiving. Like, it's a lightweight looking car, but it's pretty freaking heavy, and if you're not careful around corners, you can spin this thing out. Alright, so you guys heard me earlier say that this is the last true S4, and I say it in a way like this car is a testament to what an S4 used to be. It's very mechanical, like driver's car, is what an S4 used to be. Just like a lot of old cars, like a lot of M cars, were truly about the drivability experience, not so much about the electronic stuff like the B8 S4 has and other platforms. If we were to talk about pros and cons, I would say on modern S4s, like obviously they've got more comfortable interiors, they tend to handle a little bit better, maybe a little bit more safer with their traction aids, and their ABS systems are a little bit more advanced than, let's say, the B5 platform. But if you're looking for a true driver's car with not a lot of comfort, not a lot of tech, and a lot of just literally just you in the car, B5 S4 is the perfect car for that. Also, this thing broke during the shoot, but we're not going to talk about that or show it on camera because it hurts my feelings, and like my finances are already all screwed up, you know what I'm saying? But like, we're just going to pretend that didn't happen. Thank you for watching. Batman. Who goes there? Morning. I'm out of breath. Oh man. I'm all lethargic. My nuts are tight. It's all that breath control, man. Ain't good for the body. Oh.